Yes, to my audience, as always, please use our Q&A section to ask any question for our panelists. As a matter of fact, this time around, I have with me our gorgeous head of professional development, Amanda Zwane. Please turn on your camera and say hi to the people.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us. As Sia said, there's a Q&A at the bottom. So if you have any questions, please post them down there and we'll field them at the end of the discussion.
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely. So any questions that you guys have, please put them there and then we'll tackle them as and when. Let's get right to it, guys, because time is also money as we know it. You guys are all very well educated. So I guess the first question is, how important is education as part of one's career development plan? And maybe you can just unpack as to how it has served you in your career aspirations. Maybe let me start with Ms. Kunene.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayeza. We are not that educated. We just try. We are attempting.
Oh, the humility, it's fine. You want to be humble.
So I would say education is very important as part of career development. It's important in all the stages of your career. And as a professional, I always tell people that you have to constantly study and keep yourself, abreast with what is going on, keep your mind updated. So education forms a critical part and it plays a very significant role as you maneuver your career path. So I even encourage people, for instance, if I find someone like a young person that has just recently left school or has left school for quite a number of years and they haven't gone to like an institution of higher learning or even to a TVET college to even get a skill, I always encourage them to say, hey, these are the times that we are living in and it requires for a skilled labor force. So it's important that after your matric, try and get your bachelor's. And even those that have already acquired education through various institutions of higher learning, I always encourage them that, hey, after you've done with your bachelor's degree, it's important to upgrade yourself maybe to an honors degree because that also widen your opportunities. You were saying that earlier on that you initially thought you would be going through the accountancy stream, but it's always important that, okay, now I've changed my mind and this is a stream that I want to focus on. So it's important that as you move along the career path, you find different even causes that you do to just upgrade on what you have, because that that there's a number of people that are unemployed in South Africa. That rate is increasing exponentially every year. So it's important that as a professional, you set yourself apart, you study further, you go up to your master's if you still have that energy, or you can even do other programs that will capacitate you and upskill you within that career growth. So I would say that education plays a very key and central role in your career path. So it has also worked for me as well, as you have said that we have studied up until postgraduate level. So that has really personally helped me a lot to not only just focus on an undergraduate degree, but to progress also academically, because that also has created even greater opportunities for myself. And it also assisted me to even introduce me into being in management at a very younger age and to handle other bigger portfolios. I could just say that it was mainly because of my educational background that was able to set me apart from my peers and even was able to give me those opportunities at a very even younger age when I was still, I am still a young professional, only just left with a year. So when I was like a very younger professional. So yes, Mr. Mayeza, education is very key. Education is very central as you maneuver this career path. So it has also assisted me as well, even in my own personal career development plan. So yeah.
Nice. Mr. Ndlovu, do you agree?
How can I disagree with the head of thought leadership of the BMF? So I'll just add that it's important to add more frameworks, different ways of thinking into your war chest. And secondly, it's important to note that you must have a war chest, especially if you see yourself in a leadership space sometime in the future. So you need to take a step back, accept that you don't know everything, and in moving into a space where you increase your war chest, in understanding that as a leader, you need frameworks, you need models, you need concepts, you need ideas. You need to get lost in that space in order for you to expand your mind. And psychology tells us that once your mind has been expanded, it doesn't return back to its original shape, form. That's the power of education. It stretches your mind, and the consequences are quite vast. So the more you stretch your mind, you start finding yourself questioning even the people you hang around, not because you think you're better, but because your mind is stretching. So as your mind stretches, the people around you as well, you question them, you question where you are, you question where you're going, you question your family background, you question the building blocks thereof, you question the state of the country, you question the state of the economy, you question the system, you question the education system, is it working? And that's all as a result of stretching your mind. So imagine if you don't stretch your mind, you'll remain with a mentality that is quite narrow, quite skewed, and even skewed as well, depending as to how far you go. So the messaging around education, especially, I mean, we want a BMF platform now. So BMF young professionals need to be very, very clear on the messaging around education and its impact and the future of your province, right? So we're talking on a KZN BMF platform.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
so where's the future of KZN from an economic perspective, from a BMF YP, right? You guys need to be able to articulate those views and actually irritate people around what you think. That's the other thing about education. Especially if you're passionate about the idea, right? So you're passionate about the idea, you don't sleep at night, you become relentless, you want to champion the idea, even when you feel like you're tired, but the idea keeps you alive. And so I think, you know, over and above what we're talking about today, the BMFYP KZN, I have not seen your strategy documents. I don't know what you guys are thinking, but it's important with this first question on how you guys will go back and define education as the YP structure in KZN and see how to express yourselves around it, and the future economy of the province is very important, because the YP, I think, for me, is probably a sleeping giant in the BMF right across the country. We're supposed to be agitating the most, you know. So on this specific question, education is key, the stretching of the mind, and also it forces you to do an analysis of, I like to do this analysis of the key economic drivers of the country. So people may say the country should go in a certain way, but when you look at data, it tells you something completely different. So people will say agriculture must take center stage, but when you look at the numbers, finance is the biggest industry. It contributes over 23, 24% to GDP on a quarterly basis. Agriculture is less than 10%, right? So not to say you can't develop skills in agriculture, but you got to look at the data and respond to the data, right? Manufacturing is also less than 15% contribution, etc. So I'm just saying, you know, education forces you to look at the actual data of things, how things really are, vis-a-vis how you want them to be like. Because sometimes we get into that clash where what you want to see based clashes with what is reality, you know. And that's a function of, for me, it's a function of the tension of education and not. And when you start articulating certain things, people then say, where do you get that from? that can't be true. My lived
Who's your
experience.
source?
What's your source? My lived experience is different. And those tensions, you must welcome them. You must not run from them. You must welcome those tensions and engage it. To say, no, but statistics essay is saying this. Maybe you have a problem with the methodology that's coming out of stats essay. That's another argument. But the numbers coming out in terms of the economy, the EAP, etc., we must respond to that. So education, I think, clears the mind a bit even more for you to actually seek the truth. You don't just take what we say and what someone says, or even what Oli writes there as thought leadership as the truth. You interrogate. You say, okay, you interrogate it, and that's a function of education. Okay, let me stop there.
I'm tempted to ask how it has served you, because you have a very interesting background where you come from I want to say an educated family. Specifically, your father was, from what I've read, the person that you was very closely aligned to. Has that influenced you being very as passionate as you are about education, or was it were the external influences as far as that is concerned?
It's an interesting question. So we are also told that if your parents are educated, the probability of the children in that family to be educated is higher. So if you have parents who are less educated or no education, or talking post-matric, your worldview is shaped in a certain way. Of course, we've seen kids go far and beyond that. I'm just saying the influence, the level of influence. So if your parents are educated, there is this positive influence that rubs off on you, that you should, fall in love with education and be passionate about growth and development and transformation as well. I want to add transformation there, because people don't see it as an issue of education or function of education. It actually is. And my parents, I would say, were my first teachers. At any moment, my father used to like teaching me something out of the blue, right? So we would be doing something else, and then you'd say, oh, by the way, informal education, right? This is informal now. So the classroom was anywhere and everywhere, right? He'd be preparing for board meetings. I would sit next to him, and he would say, you see how structured accounting is, right? This is how it is. This is what it is. When he's preparing his speeches, I would sit next to him and ask about the concepts, right? What is this concept? What is that concept? So they did not shy away from exposing us to what they do and what they're passionate about as well. So to a large degree, we are heavily influenced by our backgrounds, our parents, their thoughts, their ideas. We may not agree all the time, but the influence is there, and I acknowledge it, that a large part of some of the choices I've made is stemming from the influence of my parents, and that's how it should be. Your parents are your first mentors, right? So yeah, both my parents also highly educated. So you can see that, hey, you gotta be passionate about something. And another point is that they never wanted to force us to follow a certain vocation. That was entirely up to us, but you've got to have a vocation, you've got to have a direction. So a large part of who I am is because of my parents.
And the education that was, within those circles. When you're talking, I just got a picture of Mufasa and Simba there being taught about the valleys. Anyways, moving on. So I shared my story earlier on, obviously. And one could say essentially I bumped into my career, and it served me well up to a certain point. So I think the question that I was asking myself, what are the things that I can do now if I wanted to switch careers? So what advice can you give someone who's looking to switch careers? Let me start with Ms. Kunene.
Thank you, sir. So an advice I would give for a person who wants to change careers, firstly, you need to do your research. And you must understand, like you need to be clear about your objective. Why do you want to do the career change? Because some people these days, they want to do career changes because where they are, there's no money and it's not driven by passion. So sometimes that can even frustrate you even more and can lead you to depression. We know how mental health these days is such a big problem. So the first and foremost advice I would give a person who really wants to do career changes is that they need to understand why do they want to do the career change. And they need to do something that they're really passionate about. And it should really not be about, I know this type of a job is not giving me money, because again, money is a contested issue, that the fact that somebody's earning higher than, it depends on how you handle that money, because you can even get a higher salary, but still find yourself more in debt. So I'm talking in a platform because we are also young professionals, and some people make some decisions that ultimately affect themselves, and they end up even being in debt, So it shouldn't be a career change because I want to get more money. So you must first do your research in the market. What is most relevant? What are the career opportunities that are there? What are the job prospects looking like? I think Ukajeni touched on this one before, in the context to say that sometimes the emphasis is around agriculture, but when you look in reality, you can see that there's more job prospects within the financial services. So for me, is that you take a decision that is evidence-based, that is based on the research that you've done, and you know that, okay, now this is the path that I want to take. And also just seek advice from the people that are already in that career path. If you want to venture from, maybe you're changing, you're saying, okay, social work is outdated, but maybe you are leaning to something that is closer to it, and you're saying you are wanting to branch off to psychology. You do that research, and then you seek for guidance and for advice for people that are already in the field, similar to saying you are switching a career from accountancy to law, vice versa. So you must also make sure that you have that relevant information and that you seek that guidance from the people that are already in the field. So it's never too late to do any career switches or career changes. It can be done, but I think it should be guided. Yeah.
And it needs to align to your values and your passion. So one of the things that I actually noticed, especially when I was researching, was it seems the concept of career development is very much aligned to personal development. So you need to know who you are.
Yes.
Before you can, call it. But then I'm just putting a spin on this issue, and maybe one day you can also chip in here. South Africa, our biggest issue is not necessarily unemployment in and of itself. It's structural unemployment, where there's misalignment between what we have from a skill set perspective to what the industries are looking for. So can we then sort of try and link those opportunities and see if we can actually seize the moment, or do we still need to align us seizing the boom in the fintech industry, for example, to what we're passionate about? So I guess what I'm trying to ask is, to what extent is personal development or personal development linked to your career development as far as that is concerned? Monde?
Yep. Yeah, it's a mammoth of a task, because again, when we look at the data and we look at the facts, structurally, our economy has not fundamentally changed since 1994, right? So we've got those structural challenges. That's why the BMF still exists, to drive transformation structurally. That's why we've got the transformational laws, which have created the Black middle class today. So I'll put a spanner in the works. Affirmative action, broad-based Black economic empowerment has produced this educated class that we are sitting in today. without those, not to say there weren't any Black people who were educated before, but it was much harder to break the door down without these policies. And today you find Black people who ascend into very powerful positions now, defending companies for not transforming or even attacking affirmative action, right? But it was affirmative action that got you there in the first place. So I think we've got to be mindful that we've got a dual responsibility. So there's a dual responsibility on one side to develop as a professional, as a leader. And on the other side, it is the activism role. You can't, in the South African context, we shouldn't separate the two, especially in a BMF platform. You can't just say, you must develop personally. What is the link between your career trajectory and your personal development, and leave out the fundamental mandate of transformation from that. So you've got a dual responsibility, which makes it much harder. That when you get into a space, you've got to be a change agent. You've got to be a champion for transformation as well. And because you want to champion transformation, then people will always question your performance. That's the first thing that they'll go for, right? So when you want to change, therefore, going back to your question, linking personal development and career development, are you performing where you work? Right? What is the why? The fundamental why of changing careers? Because if there's an underlying issue of non-performance right there, you're giving everybody else a bad name. Let me put it bluntly: you give Black people a bad name. Right? Then you want to shift careers and go into something else. It's
the
almost
old African adage.
Let me give you another example. A politician would want to lead as a CEO in the public sector, right, without having much experience as to what it entails to be a chief executive. And the administration would take someone who can be a C-suite level or just below. They parachute them into becoming a CEO of a state-owned company, right? I don't want to give definite examples of names, but this has happened countless times where someone is switched from one space to another space without a clear proven track record, not to say undermining their ability, but questionable performance. And then in addition to the why of the underlying performance, again, in changing your careers is the issue of your value system. What are your core values? We struggle so much to align, even in the workplace, your personal values and the values of the organization and the values of your manager that you report to. So you're having these things clashing. And that's another reason why we actually job hop. In the early 1990s, it was called the yippie, right? It's called the yippie, where Black people were jumping from, moving from one side to the other. And when you check why they're really, really jumping, it's not because they're not good at what they do or they don't love what they do. They're jumping because there's a clash in value systems. Now, part of the work of affirmative action was to unbundle corporate culture as it was, right? So you have now historically a corporate culture being led by management, white management, that took shortcuts in terms of ethical shortcuts. They were known to be Christian, by the way, right? It was a Christian state, but at the very same time, it was underdeveloping Blacks, underutilizing Blacks, right? And then the first generation of Black managers had to really work so hard to prove themselves beyond reasonable doubt that they're worthy of the role that they're in. Part of the atrocities of the first generation of Black managers, was that white management used to force them to make tea. They used to turn them into tea ladies. So a grown man is a Black manager, you're turned into a tea lady, you're abused in the workplace, okay? Now, some years later, you've got other Blacks now reporting to you, post-94. You've got this history, and we've all seen this, where the way Black managers treat other Black employees. It's almost the same way they were treated by white managers. And that is why, some couple of years ago, I think it was 2015 or so, the BMF found that it seems like Black employees prefer to report to a white manager than a Black manager. That's another reason why people want to change, Black people want to change careers, because of the ill treatment of Black managers, you see. So the why is very deep. And again, also, if it seems like there's a glass ceiling that cannot be broken, then you want to start your own business as well. So I'm just highlighting all of these factors that I see that impact personal development of Black professionals. Even when you read the employment equity report and you look at all the other business types, when you get to a certain level, Black people start to disappear in the private sector. As you go higher, they fill other business types, right? So you can see there is a definite problem there in terms of culture, in terms of leadership, which we have not yet cracked. And at top management level, we have around 4% of Black women at the top, when I think it's about 8.something% of Black men at the top. So you can see that we've got a serious problem around culture, leadership, and that impacts personal development outlook. It impacts your career trajectory as well. Corruption as well also impacts. You are forced to sign as a CFO. They want you to sign off things that are unethical. That affects your personal trajectory. That is this who I am, right? And there are people who have been faced with those things at municipal level, provincial government level, being forced to do things that they don't want to do. So that also then makes them, you know what, I just want to get out of this place and get out. So yeah, no, let me stop there.
I like that. It's very interesting. So just to play back and summarize, if I'm hearing you guys correctly, do your research and know why you want to do the change, and also link that to what's out there in the market. But also thirdly, you need to have, as a Black person in these corporate spaces, you need to have the activism side of things, where you now actually view yourself as a change agent. And then when you infiltrate those spaces, it's a question of how do I then represent my people? Does that summarize it?
100%.
I like that.
Yeah.
Let's move on. So one of the questions, we touched on this in our previous webinars, where but I actually want to ask this question from a career development perspective. How important is personal branding? More specifically, how can we use social media as part of our career development plan? Is it a thing? Is it possible? Let's go again, Ms. Kunene.
I thought Gajeni will take a first bite on this one.
No, he's got the other one coming.
It's fine. So personal branding is vitally important. It's important to know who you are and what you stand for. What we spoke about values earlier on. So you know, as you develop in your career, it must be clear what you stand for. You know, it even helps if people they have an opportunity, maybe in another company, they already know, Ukoli stands for this and does not stand for this, you know. So it makes it easier for if you are visible, even especially on social media platforms. Sometimes you would tell these youngsters to say, hey, please don't post such things because they might have an adverse consequence on you when you're trying to look for employment, but they'll think it's a joke. But right now, it has really become such a thing that even when people are going through the selection process, they also do check your social media pages to check the type of people, the type of person that you are, the type of thinking that you possess. And sometimes just mainly from your social media page, in that job that you would be applying for, they would say, no, we really don't want to associate with such an individual. This type of an individual does not really represent the values or the principles of that organization. And you would just really lose out on that job opportunity just because of how you portray yourself in public platforms. So how you carry yourself, again, Gajeni did touch on this when we are talking about the importance of education, to say even the type of people that you surround yourself with, you know, the type of places that you go and socialize in, they do have an impact in your personal branding, in your social media standing as well. So it's very important to have a very clear personal brand that is persuaded by your own values, so that it's easier if you build that self-inner value system, that when you are in any company, when you are in any organization, you won't deviate and you won't do things that are not ethical or that are not aligned to an integrity. So it starts with your values as a person. I normally say that we can have organizational values in business and in companies, but if that person doesn't have a clear value system, you would one day find them wanting when it comes to things of ethics, when it comes to things of integrity. So building that branding is critical, especially in this era where everything is now done on social media platforms. So I would really urge even the other young professionals that are in this platform that to say, if you were posting, even sometimes having views on your political affiliations, I think we need to be careful even around that, because it does hinder your chances of being employed in a certain institution or in a certain company. So it is very, very critical how we portray ourselves, how we put our thoughts in those social media platforms. Yeah.
Very interesting. And it's actually quite important one around the political affiliations, because we generally take this, what we post for granted.
Yes.
It comes back to, because I remember there's been certain instances, specifically in the past couple of years, where people get fired because they posted something that was unsavory. So maybe it's time I also put on a suit and tie and take a picture for my LinkedIn profile. What on that is social media, or rather personal branding, is it linkable to career development?
Yeah, so I think the first point is everyone is selling something, even when you're not aware.
Very true.
So how you dress, how you talk, how you move, how you think, you are constantly selling something about yourself. And I'm not sure that many of us are aware of that reality, that we are selling something, right? So it's firstly being aware, self-aware, that you don't become a brand as a result of being part of an organization or part of a movement. You are a brand before that. So there's something that you stand for, whether you've defined it or not, it will come out in how you speak. What you think about certain things will come out, your behavior as well. So you'll be selling something at some point. So it's for us, firstly, to note that everybody is in the business of selling, right? So you're selling something. Hopefully, you are selling ideas. Secondly, you've got to be clear on the priority of your selling. Right? So what's more important in your personal branding space? And coming to social media, you can tell by people's posts as to what exactly they are selling, right? What they are offering, what they like, what they don't like. So if you enjoy posting content-driven things, that's why LinkedIn, I think, is very important, because it's a more disciplined space, right? LinkedIn is very disciplined. You can't just be ill-disciplined there. I mean, you'll be a loner there, right? So LinkedIn forces you to be disciplined without you realizing it, because you can already feel it. You log on, you can tell people are posting more progressive career-driven things, and again, also selling ideas, right? Selling ideas, quotes. People are looking for jobs. how to better brand yourself as well, right? So you'll find those things if you spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, which is very, very important as well. The other platforms, you know, I would caution, you know, against them. At some point, we felt that Facebook was the place where you can just be yourself. You know, there was that time in South Africa, and then it moved from there to Twitter, right? And Twitter is just wild. So I would say, from a personal branding point of view, you've got to have a strategy around how you utilize those platforms. Don't just, you know, get on them, right? Be very clear as to what you use them for. And if you are sociable, you can be sociable in a nice, good way anyway, whether it's Facebook or Twitter. So just have a strategy for how you utilize them and what you show, and how you show it. So you've got to sit down and actually think through that. And there are people who are making careers out of branding on social media, right? It is their profession to help you and I position ourselves in the social media space, because the world is in that space, and getting more into our personal space. The people who created social media did not expect it to blow up the way it did. Right? They're surprised that, wow, there's been such an uptake to this. At the core of social media, in my view, is relationships.
Yes.
Is relationships. And if social media is going to displace in-person engagement and building of relationships, then we're in trouble. Right? So yes, we must spend time on Zoom because, you know, I'm in Gauteng, or Tole and I in Gauteng, you guys are in KZN, right? So we can get on the platform. But nothing beats in contact sessions. Just like in the consulting space we're in, we don't like the Zoom stuff, right? We want to deal with leaders and teams in person, right? Because 80% of what you communicate is non-verbal, right? So if it's non-verbal, you've got to be in the room, you've got to feel the energy. So you've got to be very clear that social media should not be the primary place where you communicate effectively, right? So you've got to have a strategy around that, and at the heart of it is that. And then lastly, I just want to highlight this thing. You can be at your best, right, on social media, but when you go for the job interview, you are always at the mercy of the one who will make the final decision in appointing you. So if you have, on the issue of personal branding, if you've got 10 people lined up for a job, similar qualifications, the one who gets the job is not necessarily the best person for the job, because that's subjective. When you say she's the best person for the job, it really is subjective. It is based on what the one who has power is looking for. And in their heads, there's a certain bias. There's a certain bias that they want to replicate. They want to build on it, right? Especially if it's unchecked. So if someone reflects your values, and it's much easier, right? Because you want to maintain that mode. And that's why I'll always go back to the white management example of apartheid, because they wanted to reproduce themselves. Till today, we're still struggling with that, right? So you'll have a black CEO come out of a certain bank and replaced by a white CEO, right? Because the perception, the biases, you know, white men are better money, are better leaders, right? So people want to reproduce what they think subjectively is the best. So we really got to take note of those things, that we've got biases, we've got preferences, and in the workplace, it's really becoming very difficult. What exactly are we looking for? And that is why I'm going back to affirmative action, that it forces different people to come into the workplace, to bring in different kind of energy, different ideas. People don't look like you. People don't talk like you. And I think, again, last point on personal branding, when you build your relationships, don't look for people who think like you, otherwise you will not grow. You've got to be challenged, right? You've got to step out of your mold, step out of your biases, step out of that framework, don't reproduce what you think is always right. And that can only happen if you create that tension between yourself and others. All right, let me stop.
Very interesting one. And actually, I want to keep you on the mic for a bit, because you're touching on concepts that speak to us Africans. And I know you are a consultant in a company called African Leadership Development. So maybe tell us more about what is that about, and what are the principles that we can inculcate in our respective careers?
All right. I mustn't give everything because
and only 5 minutes before you
I'll get in trouble with my boss here. Okay. So African leadership started in the 80s, and it played a role in shaping the leadership transition in the country. So it played a background role in driving leadership development in South Africa, and a host of leaders, have come through the hands of the founder and chairman of African Leadership Development. And there are many projects that have been done. So it also focuses on the African leadership experience, and that is something that trying to pursue all the time. That what is the African leadership experience? So in the 90s, as an example, we did do research around the different leadership experiences. So Jewish, Afrikaans, Afrikaner, African, there's about four or five, and that research work was commissioned, and it was done. There's still so much in that stuff, right, that has not necessarily been taught or been, further explored. But the leadership experience of Africans, what is it? And that was the question as to how do we answer what is our own leadership experience. That's part of the work that was done, as well as looking at autobiographical leadership experiences. So in other words, we pursue the practice of leadership. So not necessarily the theoretical frameworks, command and control, etc., but in the space of adaptive leadership, moral leadership, some autobiographical leadership models, and ultimately now we've coined a new leadership concept, which the founder had been developing for some years now, called outlier leadership. So I'm just going to briefly paint this outlier picture. So in the outlier leadership concept, we argue that we want to understand your leadership journey from childhood. So people say 0 to 7, like Catholics would say, give us your child 0 to 7, they'll be Catholic for life, right? So those early formative years. But we look at it from a leadership perspective. And part of that framework, we then call it the idea. Right? So what is that idea from your childhood that you cannot get out of your mind? I think it goes back to one of the other questions of changing careers, because some people their minds are restless around, I've always had this idea. So let me give an example, and we use Nelson Mandela as an example. So when Nelson Mandela says never and never again, right? That's not a new statement he's mentioned. It's not new in his head. It's something that he grew up with, right? So never again will I want to see X, Y, and Z. And all of us, if we go back to our early childhood years, there is that idea that that has been growing within you for many years. Have you explored that idea, right? Etc. So let me stop there with that idea before I get into trouble. And then there's the issue of the era, right? So the era in which you live in. So we live in now in a post-94 environment. And how are we relating to the era? The previous leaders that have come out of the different eras, right? Pre-94 apartheid. You look at how the era has produced certain kind of leaders and leadership. What is this era doing in our time? And where do you find yourself, in that era? Number 3, personal crucibles. So there's personal things that we go through that shape us, shape our leadership styles, shape our managerial styles, right? You lose parents at an early age, that shapes you. You go through a divorce, that shapes you. I mean, the list is endless, right? We call those crucibles that I do go through. Then I'll just give you the last one. We also use this concept called cathedral thinking. And cathedral thinking is basically, there's a cathedral that in Barcelona that's still not finished, by the way, since I think it's 1886, somewhere there. That person who started building that cathedral eventually died, right? They have not finished it. They plan to finish it, last time I checked, 2026. But the whole point is we must be intergenerational, right? So we're building for the future. We're not building for the short term. So Monde has a role to play to put his brick down in leadership. Ole has a role to play. Amanda has a role to play. Malus has a role to play. Sia has a role to play. Undabezita is still not back yet. He has a role to play. But every brick we put on is purposeful, right? That's the trick of the intergenerational leadership space. So that is, in a nutshell, African leadership development, and some of the concepts and ideas that we drive in building leaders, in building teams, and building organizations.
Some of them are powerful. I'm supposed to be taking notes here, but I can't multitask. Colin, I don't know if you've got some pointers as far as African leadership is concerned. I guess also the question then becomes, is there space for Afrocentrism within the corporate space? And can we use some of the Afrocentric cultures and the things that we grew up with in penetrating and setting those, using those to set us apart from a career perspective?
Gajen is the one who's mostest with that information. I don't have much of knowledge when it pertains to African development leadership. I'm still really learning from him as well. So Gajeni, just over to you on that one.
So I think it's part of the African leadership experience. So that research work of going back and looking at some of the gems of African leadership. What is African leadership? How do we define it today? What are those other networks within there? How did we lead, back then? What can we still take? What were our core values, etc., as we migrate into different leadership spaces of this century and beyond? And one of the arguments that we keep making is that this is Africa's century, right? This is our century, and we've got to make it count, and we've got to learn, unlearn, and relearn certain things and ideas. So our cultures are rich; they are replete with concepts, they are replete with examples. Dr. Rowe calls us "Let Africa Lead," for an example. There's powerful concepts there. He even tries to go back as he unpacks Ubuntu, for an example. And we're still struggling to still unpack Ubuntu as a philosophy and inculcating it into business practice as well, right? But he has attempted to do that. He keeps trying to do that as well. And we've got, our perspective as well, but they all merge. And so there is a whole new world in terms of African leadership development that we still need to explore. And again, I'm now throwing it back to BMF KZN YP, right? So what are you guys, how do you guys view this? What are you going to table as the perspective? What can we learn from our cultures, etc.? In fact, before we close, you're reminding me now, there's a model which I shared with BMF MLDP students on Sunday, something that I had been working on for some time, and I shared it for the first time publicly on Sunday, taking the Zulu spear and shield, right, and applying that to some leadership concepts and a few ideas. So I can share that before we close today. In fact, yeah, I just reminded of that, just to show you that there's so much within our space that we can use to help us understand the world we're in and understand ourselves as we move forward. The affirmative action blueprint, the Basotho hat model, I mean, it's the Basotho hat, right, from Lesotho. So the BMF leaders sat down and said, no, but how can we best explain, this thing? Said, man, let's look at our cultures. What is there? Then they picked the Basotho hat. And I'm telling you, the reason why corporates today still refer to the pattern grading system, it's because of the work of the BMF through the Basotho hat in the early 90s. And many people don't know that, but it's because of the BMF, and it's also because they drew from our own experiences that actually this Basotho hat represents so much more than just sitting on a man's head, in Lesotho. So there's a lot within our space that we can further develop. I think there's still a lot more work to be done.
Absolutely, absolutely. We'll see if the time allows, and then I'm very excited to actually see that Zulu sphere, because it's quite important that we have some sense of identity within these spaces that we're trying to penetrate as well, and walk with pride, saying this is what we can offer as a value proposition. Speaking of which, Olile, so you are the head of thought leadership research and programs, and I know BMF has partnered with Wits Business School as well as the Gibbs to offer some of the programs undertaken by these institutions to our constituency within BMF. So, and I also know you have a vision of expanding the in-house programs beyond the managerial leadership development program. So what is the value proposition of that informed this thinking, and how do these assist young professionals who are keen to advance their careers to managerial levels? I'm pretty sure we've touched on some of them, but maybe articulate them a bit more.
Yeah, no, we had in our previous sessions that we had, but in the interest of other people that are in the platform. So yes, so one of the strategic pillars, the current strategy of the BMF, is the sustainable development of Black excellence. So in trying to drive that, or putting that strategy or that objective forward, the organization has partnered with institutions of higher learning to try and frustrate this development of Black talents or Black excellence. And we, yes, as you have said, we have partnered with other institutions, and others are still in the pipeline. We're still having conversations to have them on board. I know we had a session 2 weeks ago with the executives at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, the Chancellor and the Registrar, and other executive members here to try and sorry, Sia?
I'm saying that pleases me.
Yeah, to try and have a similar partnership or collaboration in place. But the one that currently exists indeed is the one from the Wits Business School and Gibbs. So the arrangement there between the BMF and these two institutions is that we are offering bursaries, 5 bursaries per year. So it's 10, so it's 5 each. It's either between the MBA program, the Master of Business Administration, or a postgrad diploma in business administration. So you must be a BMF member, and you obviously must be able to meet the criteria or the requirements of an MBA program or a requirements of a PGDIP. Then you go through obviously a vetting process and a selection process, and then we award those bursaries to those members of the BMF who are members in good standing, obviously, and also are deserving and eligible to get these bursaries. So currently we have with Gibbs and with Wits. The Wits one for 2022 has just closed. We closed in the very last week of September, and we haven't done the selection, so we still have to do the selection for the cohort of 2023. But as I've said, we've had engagements with other institutions in South Africa, other universities, and the recent one was with UKZN. But obviously, each and every institution is unique in terms of their revenue and income generation streams. Others are able to say, no, we are and we can be able to partner with the BMF. Maybe other institutions, it would be another collaboration. Maybe it's not going to be in a form of bursaries, but we are keeping that partnership open. I know UKZN has said they are keen to partner with the BMF, but currently their fiscus is not, the balance sheet is not looking good to be offering 5 bursaries to BMF members. So yeah, we do urge all the young professionals in KZN that the next intake for these bursaries, they must please apply for them, and they will go through the selection process. And also, as you touched on, we also have that in-house managerial leadership development program, where we really are trying to develop effective managerial leaders who will lead with impact in their organizations, in the BMF, and a society at large. So again, we will be having the intake for 2023. We will be advertising towards the end of this year or early next year. So it's really such a great program. We've had such significant success stories from the program. People have really brought up life-changing solutions in the local government space, in municipalities, and government and private sector, and even provided some of the solutions within the BMF. So if there's anyone who's keen, they can just contact me via my office, and we can have the MLDP. Currently, it's conducted nationally, so it's a virtual platform so that we can have a greater intake and uptake for and open it to more young professionals of the BMF within South Africa. So I think they are hoping to have, I think, a maximum of around 45 candidates around the country. So if we can have people, especially young professionals within KZN to take on these spaces as well, would really greatly appreciate that. I know that the current Mrs. South Africa 2022 is also an alumni of the program. So we've had a lot of people who are leading advocacy work, thought leadership work throughout the country that have been really products of this program. And some people that have been part of the program, they said even an MBA is really unmatched when it comes to this program. And then Gajeni also alluded to the fact that we now have introduced a new module that he's been working he's been working to develop, but he delivered it for the first time in the last block that we had. It's called a BMF type of a manager. So then it takes you through the different management styles, touching on African leadership as well. So, and then other programs that are coming is the Women Leadership Development Program, where we really want to capacitate women, especially those that seek to take up senior or executive roles. And in that program, we want to include what is called like a political IQ to teach women or females how to maneuver in this very political, a dynamic era that we are in. So yeah, there will be a number of programs as well that are coming up. Some of them are really at a conceptualized stage, and we will develop them further. We'll ensure that they are tailor-made to suit our members at an executive level, a young professionals level, and we also need to do something around the student chapter as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Look, I'm very excited personally, especially because I can personally attest to the in-house, the MLDP, as well as the WITS Business School, specifically the PDPA. They're really, really excellent programs to drive that thinking around you sort of now, penetrating or infiltrating these management roles. So I think we've got a bit of work on our side to actually make sure that there's representation from a KZN perspective.
Please.
So also very excited about the UKZN side of things as well.
Yes.
But moving so mentorships. One of the obviously the tips when I was researching this topic, one of the things that was said is that mentorship is very important for career development purposes. Is this still still relevant in this day and age. And I think we've seen how predatory these relationships can get in some instances. So the question is, mentorship, is it still relevant in this day and age, or can we actually navigate these spaces on our own and using some of the networks that we've got?
I was losing you a bit there.
Oh, sorry, I think my network.
I think it's about regarding the relevance of mentorship. So
That's
just
exactly
I'll just be brief as well, just in the interest of time. So yes, mentorship is still very much of a relevant concept or idea in this contemporary era. You know, in Zulu we say indlela ibuzwa kwabaphambili. So so it's important. You don't have to tie yourself to one person. So you can just maybe broaden. That would be my advice, because, you know, as we say, that sometimes these relationships go away and then it's something that you did not expect. So I would advise that maybe you can even get 2 or 3 people that you, from time to time, you have sessions with. They keep you accountable, whether in terms of your own vision board or your own plans in terms of your career development. So you don't necessarily have to tie yourself to one person. You can get a person that is older than you. You can get a person maybe that is a peer, that you would have these sessions where it's a platform of information sharing, and you would be able to equip and capacitate each other. And then you can also get somebody that is well within your field of work, or maybe a person that is an expert. Then in that, it doesn't become too much of a draining relationship. Sometimes you find mentees running away from their mentors because now it has become something that is very strenuous. It shouldn't be the case. It should be a relationship whereby a person is able to go and find that well of wisdom or that well of knowledge from that person, and they'll be able to impart it to them to better navigate their career path. So that's what I would really advise other young professionals.
So you're still pro mentorship?
No, definitely. But again, in that manner that I articulated, because I've been a mentor when I was in the university. Sometimes they would end up running away from you because, you know, so you have to try and I understand also the dynamics of a person. If the person is going through something, it mustn't become too strenuous, because then the person ends up not learning from you, because now there's that relationship of fear, or I need to be accountable, or and people end up lying that, oh no, I'm working on my vision board. Yes, I'm doing this. Yes, I'm registering. Yes, I've submitted. So we must try and not make it to be so a very strenuous type of a relationship. Yes, but mentorship, we still really much need it, because, you know, you are able to get that advice and that guidance. We're now living in very challenging times, even in terms of work. And I really encourage that as young people, we need to have people who have traveled this road to say, hey, if I'm confronted with such a situation, how do I best navigate? Because sometimes you would be in a deep end and you're cracking your head in the corner by yourself. Whereas there's a person that has gone through the very same journey, and they can make your path a bit less, they can make it more bearable in whatever predicament that you might be faced with. So yes, contemporarily, I'm still very much a pro mentorship. It's very, very important.
I like that. Whilst on that, is it better to get a mentor within the company or find someone outside? And this takes into consideration one of the things that you mentioned, that, you know, these environments can be very toxic. Workplaces can be very toxic in some instances.
Yeah, so I think firstly, you know, when you think about mentorship, yeah, there's a difference between a mentor, a coach, and a sponsor. And I think we need to, you know, also clarify some of those things. So if you look at any sporting code, there's people behind every aspect of the game, right? So if you're playing soccer, there's the different coaches for the different, you know, there's a striking coach, there's coaches for midfield, There's coaches for the back line, there's goalkeeper coaches. Then there's the diet people behind that. And then there's the, management behind that. And so when you actually sit down and unpack any sporting code, you'll discover that there's so many more people behind the success of what you see in front of your eyes, right? Even if you unpack the Formula One, every driver there, you think they're driving alone, but actually there's so much more behind them. There's someone talking to them who's even sitting in another country, watching how he's turning. You're turning too much like this or like that. And the guys who change the tires have to change them within, less than 5 seconds. The whole infrastructure around the success of a Formula One driver is crazy. And if we begin to understand the depth of those things, when you just only speak to one person every 6 months and you think that you've got to win at developing yourself to a certain level, it's not going to happen. It's really not going to happen. So even in the MLDP, they speak about a personal board of directors. Polish touched on it. So you've got to have those people. So within a toxic environment, let's say you want to move into a different role. You've got to find a sponsor that is someone who speaks, who champions your cause in your absence. Someone you trust, someone you have a relationship with, and they are sponsoring your name in driving you into a particular direction within the business or without the business. In other words, in a different business altogether. And sometimes we don't pay too much attention to the sponsoring type, because a lot of us have come across our white counterparts who are not as educated as we are. And the reason being is because they've had sponsors. Okay, so someone picks up the phone and says, hey, my cousin's nephew or so-and-so needs a job, VAC work or whatever. Can you please organize something for them? Someone who sponsors your cause. And sometimes a sponsor can be a mentor as well. So you've got to identify your current needs. So you can build your mentors. So your mentor's relationship is open-ended. It's not just work-related specifically, unless you want to structure it that way, but you've got to be clear how you want to structure it. And a coach, you can also find a coach within the business who coaches you through your job, right? Certain aspects of your job that you do, or even the kind of job that you want. So you can be coached through that specific area, right? Then a sponsor doesn't coach, nor does a sponsor mentor, but the sponsor believes in you and they make sure they take your name into meetings that you will not be invited into. And that's how many people move into better roles. They move into other companies because there's people who are sponsoring and carrying their names behind them. So it's identifying those three layers. And then again, we deal with toxicity, learning to manage horizontally and also managing vertically. And we cannot run away from managing people. And one of the best ways to manage people is always to prioritize your own performance. Like we said earlier on, you've got to prioritize your performance. Number two, you've got to prioritize your time as well. Because you see, with the advent of COVID, I mean, it was crazy. We were working from home. Now you're available around the clock, right? So you get a phone call at 10 p.m. or whatever, and that kind of put things out of balance. That creates toxicity when there's no clear boundaries and so you've got to know your limitations, and don't be afraid to say, from this time to that time, I'm not available, okay, or I'm busy with the project, don't give me something else to do, right? You've got to manage that toxicity that way. Don't just be open to everything. A progressive Black CEO, he starts working from 7, 8, and then he knocks off at 6 p.m. The top Black CEO. 6 p.m. he's clear. After 6 p.m. I'm not available for work, for anything at work. But if I go to a dinner, that's fine, work dinner, whatever. But mighty 6 p.m. I put away my laptop. It's time for my family. Why? Because family is part of his value system, and he's very clear on his boundaries. So if we don't sit down and reflect on our value system, reflect on our time, reflect on our performance, we will find ourselves creating our own toxicity. And so we've got to really show up from the beginning, expectations right from the beginning, because they ask you in an interview, is there anything that you want to ask us? Or is there anything you want to say? If they don't give you that opportunity, you must say, I've got something to say. If I do get the job, this is who I am. And once you're inside, these are my boundaries. But of course, it must be to be underpinned by your performance. And when you perform, it's almost like you have a blank check, you know, to not everything, but to certain things. And if you're trusted, if your performance is trusted, it's very difficult for anyone to say, you know, you can't do that, or why are you leaving early today, or, you know, so you've got to manage horizontally and also manage vertically.
I like that. We're almost out of time, so maybe let me wrap up with this question. So on the side, Kajeni, 3 tips for someone who's looking to grow their career. What can you tell them? Monday.
Okay, so I'll leave you with this Japanese concept, which is what we've been talking about, but I'm just gonna crystallize it quickly. It's called ikigai, right? It's called ikigai.
Ikigai is.
Yeah, so you see, you know it, so I don't have to say it. But so it's got 4 elements. It's talking about the love that you have, the passion that you have. You've got to identify the passion that you have, the love that you have. Number 2, build your skills around your passion. Build your skills around your passion. Number 3, you must be able to monetize that, right? You must do that research. Number 4, you must also know what the world needs. So is my passion, the skills I'm building around, is able to monetize, but is it what the world needs as well? Or is it what South Africa needs? And if you're able to answer those questions, you'll be able to make the next step.
Love it. What's your take on that, Ms. Kunene? What are your 3 tips from?
3 tips. Firstly, it would be that once you have acquired your education, try and upgrade it, study further, study what is relevant, what is needed in the market at that time, so that you keep yourself more relevant and needed within your field and your area of expertise. Secondly, you need to do some skills refinement. So do some skills development, do a bit of some short courses. If you know that you are still lacking when it comes to budgeting, finance, just get a short course that will give you those soft skills pertaining to that. So secondly, skill refinement. And lastly is community engagement. Keep yourself engaged. Volunteer your services, because that will also assist you to set you apart and to, as we've said, keep your brand to be alive and being out there. So make sure that you get into clubs and societies, into organizations, as we have done, to volunteer our services and our expertise towards building the BMF. So I would really advise on those 3 key things for your career development. Thank you.
Absolutely love it. I saw Makeba has joined us in the last 3 minutes. I am so sad because I had so many questions for him. Simo, how are you?
Colleagues, I must really apologize. Where I was, we were hit by load shedding exactly at 6, where this session was supposed to start. And I thought there was generators to back up, but there was none, basically. So there's the other location. We're back at a hotel now, and then here there's electricity. I must really apologize profusely. There was a presentation that was prepared. I think colleagues might just circulate that. But if there's any question, in particular, a burning one, I'm happy to take it.
No, we'll just leave it because we're already out of time, unfortunately. So what we'll do is we'll see if we can circulate the presentation to the attendees. It is what it is, and unfortunately, load shedding is actually it hits the most of us at the worst of times. So it's completely understandable. Yeah, you missed out, unfortunately. It was a great conversation.
I hope there will be a next time. I really do.
No, absolutely,
And,
absolutely.
We were really robbed, Makaiba, hey?
No, we'll definitely make decisions next time. I do want to thank my panelists. You guys have been absolutely fantastic, very insightful. There's a lot of concept that I'm going to look at the recording. I'm like, yeah, let me take this for myself. And I haven't seen any questions, unfortunately. So I think we'll just leave it at that today. Where can people reach you on the socials? Are you available on Twitter by any chance, or is it just LinkedIn? Ms. Kunene, since you have the mic.
I'm available on Facebook. It's Xolile Tumanze, I think. And also on LinkedIn is Xolile Kunene. So yeah.
Mr. Zulu?
I'm a bit embarrassed even to share my handles without having said anything to this session, but I'm simply Usimo Zulu across all social media platforms: Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook. I think I'm only on all those four, but yeah. And then let's connect. Reconnect for those that we haven't met, and then we'll take ideas forward. Thank you very much again for the invitation. I'm really humbled.
Sure, no worries. No, you're most welcome. And we should be thanking you for gracing us with your presence. No, Mr. Ndlovu, where can
Yes,
we find?
sure. So it's Mondelot Ndlovu on all of the major platforms. I'm not on TikTok, so you won't find me there. So it's
Same here, actually.
We all not on TikTok, Jane, so.
I'm just saying, just in case.
I feel like everyone is revealing their age right about now.
On a lighter note, my girlfriend said she wouldn't take me serious if I'm on TikTok. I wonder what is wrong with it.
Yeah.
So, to those that have been supporting us, thank you so much. This is the last webinar for the year. I think we'll come back sometime in February with another, I want to say kick-ass, if I can use that word, webinar. We have very topical issues that are centered around our workplace and personal development and career development. As Ms. Kunene has said, there's a lot of exciting programs that we want to share with our young professionals. So it's our mandate on our end to make sure that we drive those to the masses as much as possible. And yes, Mr. Ndlovu, I will call you again to explain that spear, that Zulu spear, so that we actually have a bit of insight around that, because I was actually looking forward to it, but I want to make sure that we keep the time as well. Right, cool. Thanks, everyone. That is it. Au revoir and have a fantastic festive season. Please come back alive and in one piece so we can have more fun in the year 2023.